Hello everyone and welcome back to Jade Journey's YouTube channel, and maybe you're listening to this in your ears because it's also going to be in a podcast format shortly. Welcome back, and my name's Natalie, and today I have a special guest to the channel which I'm very excited about. Her name is Selda, and she has a past within yoga, holistic health, Ayurveda, sound healing, and has been like a spiritual guide and an intuitive consultant to this day. And I'm very curious to hear more about your journey and how you come to be doing what you're doing today, and your background, and what this path has taught you and how it's impacted your life to but having realized the importance of our health and well-being and spiritual health and the mind-body connection and all the things. So yeah, thank you for being here. Welcome, and please introduce yourself a bit further and what you're doing today and how you came on this path.
Thank you, Natalie. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So as Natalie introduced, my name is Selda. I was born in the UK, in just outside of London, where I still currently live with my husband and my son, my 3.5-year-old son. But I am of Turkish Cypriot origin. So both my parents are Turkish Cypriot, and I'm actually very passionate about my culture and my heritage. And there's a lot of wisdom that comes through my heritage, my bloodline from the women's lineage, which has been many, many centuries, I'd say, suppressed. And I think being born in the UK, my mum was born in the UK, but my dad was born in Northern Cyprus, has given me opportunity, has given me education, has given me just the freedom which a lot of previous generations have not had, to explore, to learn, to unlearn, to discover my own sense of self and place in the world, but also to be really kind of appreciative of what's been neglected before I entered the world. And I think that's really kind of why I've been on this very, very long, thorough, very profound journey that has included all the modalities that you've mentioned. And it didn't happen overnight. And I guess it's like being a singer your whole life. And then you kind of come to this place where maybe people start buying your records a bit, and it's actually, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. It's not an overnight thing. So I definitely don't think I was wise when I was 22, when I 2022, when I first started practicing yoga. It was a very physical entrance for me. But over the period of 2 decades, it has become an insanely still meditative practice, which has opened up other pathways and other channels. So the UK is a very difficult place for me to live. It always has been. I'm very climate based. I need the sun. I need light. I need more than anything. I need light, and I'm very privileged to live in a space past 8 years where there's a lot of light in my work, in my studio. But generally I find UK living very, very difficult. I think I'm a lizard, really. I need warmth. But this is where I'm based, and I spend a lot of time in Ibiza. So with my family for work, past 7 years, I've been back and forth a lot. And that's where I get my energy replenishment. It's kind of like when the bank is empty, I go to refuel as much as possible with the desire, very, very strong intuitive will and desire to be there fully at some point. But the UK is, I don't underestimate the importance and the power of what the UK has given me with my education. And I went into advertising as my first career, my first vocation at a very young age when I was 22. And I worked in a very corporate environment. as a creative, which didn't really align. And that's where I started to recognize that there was more going on in me physically, emotionally. The emotional, physical connection and mental connection was deeper than I'd ever been aware of. No education, no understanding. They don't teach it in schools. It's not, this is all together. And it was actually at that time when I first started, even though it was a very physical hot yoga practice, which I loved because I needed to be in the heat, that I started to read about Ayurveda. And when people meet me, first of all, they often think that I'm Indian or of Indian descent.
Oh, yeah.
And especially if I've been in India, traveled through India many times, and people think that I am of Indian origin. So I think there's like either a past life connection or something that really resonates deeply with me, what you were saying about the ancient practices, the rituals, the belief system. So I've studied and I've practiced, and I try to not too rigidly bring in the tools and techniques of all the different things that I've learned over 20 years. Ayurveda was very early on in my life that came in as it just felt like you could study it. I actually looked into studying it as a degree. It was 7 years, and I was like, oh, too long for me, as an Ayurvedic consultant. But what I love about these things is that you just take what resonates with you and you can instill it into your life. And with the Ayurveda, it's very simple things that can be free or relatively inexpensive. Just working with your system and your body and your constitution, just like eating seasonally and not eating leftover food for me because I'm Vata, and making sure that I'm really grounded. And in my early years of practicing yoga and teaching yoga, I was heavily Vata, and I was very out of my body a lot of the time, which meant that I wasn't teaching from a stable place. So I worked in advertising as a creative copywriter, art director for I think 6 or 7 years.
And you went to St. Martin's, right?
I studied at St. Martin's in London. I studied graphic design and advertising. And then my creative partner and I got headhunted, and we went into one of the largest corporate advertising agencies in the UK, Abbott Mee Vickers BBDO. And when my husband still works, because that's where we met. I was 22.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I was full of this energy of, it was actually a very masculine energy at that time because it was really overly Vata, and I wasn't grounded in my body. I was working with a huge amount of masculine energy, very few women in the creative department, and I was 22. So any of the women that I was around were a lot older than I was. Well, probably my age now 45, right? So there was this kind of real dissonance, and I was very insecure. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just sort of thrown into this work environment. And as the years sort of passed, I started to realize that that environment was actually quite toxic for me, because my body was really starting to show signs that of discomfort and dysregulation. And obviously all the things we talk about now, dysregulation of the nervous system, we weren't really talking about then. And so I looked to find an outlet, and it was the hot yoga. I won't say the name that it was called back then, but it was hot yoga. And I was living in Kensal Rise in northwest London, and that particular hot yoga was, 5 minutes from my doorstep. And that was the way the journey started. So I was able to stay in my position at work with my colleague, with my working creative colleague. I wouldn't have been able to do it, I don't think, without him. And go and practice yoga. And I started Pilates, and I just didn't resonate with it in any way whatsoever, because it was something about the language that some of the teachers, some of the practitioners were using, even in the hot yoga. And then I sort of started to explore, and I found Jivamukti. And Jivamukti for me was my soul practice. And I swore I'd never train in it because I just felt like it was for me. but the love came from the background of music, because I grew up with music. I grew up playing music. I did grade 8 piano and played the flute very poorly for a few years. But music was a big part of my life. We were raised around music, my brother and I. So as soon as I was in that environment and there was movement and music and soul mantra and kirtan, and I was like, wow, this is my mecca, definitely.
Yeah.
So I was addicted. So then I went through these sort of years of addiction of yoga, which I think is very common for young women. I was suffering hugely from my late teens with polycystic ovarian syndrome. The climate obviously wasn't working for me. A lot of the foods I was eating was disagreeing with my system because of the polycystic, and I wasn't really educated around it. So I had to find my own way. And the yoga path very sort of quickly highlighted where my body needed more balance in, or where things weren't working for my body. So actually there wasn't much balance at the time. I was practicing a lot. But I felt good. I felt really, really good. So I was kind of like going between this corporate work environment and practicing yoga. And then eventually I was just like, this doesn't feel right anymore. I need to be in that environment fully and really, really embrace and ensconce myself in the yoga world. So I trained with a company in Southwest London. And again, because I had come from that background, it was quite power based, quite power led. And I was still in my masculine, very much so, because of the working environment. I went full throttle into that. And it, it was my foundation, let's say that. And they covered the practice, the hatha, and they covered the Sanskrit and the ancient rituals and the background, the philosophy, but it wasn't really, it was, the focus was on the physical. And because that's where I kind of came in through this pathway, it didn't really feel, wrong. It felt right at the time. Yeah. So that was my initial entrance into the physical practice of yoga.
And I think that's kind of a very common way that people encounter yoga, like as a antidote to a stressful life, but you still do more of a intense practice because that's kind of where your energy level is at. And over time, the practice changes. And I find that with myself, I've gone to more and more yin and subtle body practices rather than actually very much in the physical.
Yeah. Well, I grew up dancing. So I danced. I was, in ballet at the age of 3, and I didn't give up till I was 18, and I danced other forms of dance as well. And then I guess my body missed movement to some degree. And then I went into the yogic path, and I was still in that kind of quite fast movement, active phase. And I was in my 20s. So yeah, I had much more energy than I've got now. But I always look and I feel, when I meet people that have never done yoga before or meditation or any type of healing modality, I always feel a little bit envious, because I'm like, wow, you have got so much to explore. The world is literally your oyster. And so I think it's all of it, any version, whatever feels right for the individual is perfect. And if you love the hot yoga and you go and you practice that every single day, and that's what brings you joy, then so be it, because we're not all here to really embrace the philosophical side of things, because also we live in a completely different culture to the Ayurvedic system, to the ancient Indian system, and we always have. But also in this modern world, it's like you've got to adapt everything. So the principles of yoga were created by men for men, so we have to make it work for us, which is what's so beautiful about the yin practice and the softer, gentler practices, which I've trained in everything. So I did, like you, I did my 200 hours. I just kept on exploring and kept on training. So I had this period of probably about 10 years where I just consistently trained, and I studied Buddhism and I studied Yin with Sarah Powers, with Norman Blair. I studied Baron Baptiste, Power Yoga, Vinyasa. I traveled to Hawaii. I traveled to America. Mexico. I literally traveled, and every time I felt the urge, the calling to study something, I would try to make it happen. At the time, I didn't have a child. I didn't have huge financial responsibilities because we were living in a 1-bedroom flat in northwest London. So our overheads were really low. My husband was working still in the agency where we met. So I had that freedom, which is part of who I am, really. And I just learned. I learned and learned and learned, and I was practicing and teaching. But I would say that really interestingly for me, I never ever felt really that comfortable in my early years of teaching yoga because I still fully hadn't grounded in myself. I hadn't really discovered who I was. I hadn't let go of the masks that I had, that had been created, or I'd created around myself, for myself within the advertising world, masculine world. So I was still carrying a lot of masculinity, and it's, slowly. It was the yin practice, the yin training, then teaching the yin, learning lots, going to many meditation retreats all around the world, starting Vipassana, really sitting in stillness, being in service as well as sitting, all of those things, life, going through multiple life changes, transitions, traumas, to kind of get to a place where I was slightly more comfortable in what I was embodying, what I was meant to be teaching. And a little fly has joined us. There you go. When the windows are open, everything comes in. Nature. Yeah, that's it. So what I would say to women, like, I have a lot of younger women come to my sound healing trainings when I hold them, and I always try to sort of see them from the perspective of where I was at when I was at that age. And the one thing I really try to get across is that, you just need to be yourself where you are now at the age that you're at, without trying to be something that you're going to be in a decade or 2 decades, which come with life, So, people sort of say, I have all this wisdom, and I'm like, I don't even know if it's wisdom. I feel silly most of the time and really uneducated most of the time. But it's just life. It's just 45 years of life.
Experience.
And being consistently on the path of evolution. So we're wired and trained to be formulaic, to follow a structure, to not really step outside of the box or the mold, because that's safe for the bigger community and global collective, for the people who are running the show anyway. But that's never been who I am, which is why I've studied so many different modalities. And it was the meditation that led me back to sound. So the yoga physical aspect was the start. And, it's like the koshas. You start with the very physical and you move outwards, and you become further away from you and closer to the oneness, the collective nature, whatever you want to call it, your higher self. I mean, everyone has their own variation of how to explain it, but it does take a long time. And the sound was I was in Bali in 2009, I think. I took myself to Australia to work in an agency, a small creative agency. I was teaching yoga, but I went to work, and I left there, went to Bali, and then I had this sort of huge awakening of, okay, this is what I'm meant to be doing. And I was in the yoga barn in Ubud, and the yoga barn in Ubud in 2009 was tiny, and there were about 10 people practicing yoga. And I was staying in a raised, stilted hut on the rice fields, and I just walked across the rice fields, about 3 minutes across the rice fields, and I was in the yoga barn.
Wow.
That doesn't exist anymore. It didn't exist when I went back in 2016 anyway. And So obviously it's changed a lot. But in that moment I had, it was a sound healing, and there's a guy who's known on the island in Bali, Shervin, who is multi-instrumental musician, and he played the frosted bowls, and he played I think it was the sitar or something, and there was someone singing, and I was crying and crying and crying, and it was like a remembrance of music. So all of the practices of the yoga, physical or not, had led me to this moment, and that was in 2009, and I was remembering my childhood of playing the piano, dancing, being with music all the time. And from that moment, I was like, okay, this is what I'm meant to be doing. This is where I'm meant to be. So I was 30 and I was still changing. I went back to university and studied shoe design, because my grandfather was a shoemaker. My grandmother was a dressmaker. So I've got fashion in my family. And even though I was doing it, I was looking around going, yeah, but I'm not as talented as her. And they're going to do it because they've got money. And I had all these kind of like intuitive reasons why I shouldn't really. I loved it, but it still wasn't my path.
Yeah.
So I continued with the yoga, and I was like, okay, this is where I'm meant to be. And I knew, even though I was teaching, I knew that wasn't what I was going to do, but I just didn't know what it was. And when I had this experience with the sound, I thought, oh, okay, right. And it still took me then another however many years, 5 years or 6 years, to be in the space of frequency in the right way, which was with the crystal bowls. And I was in Bali in 2016, and I came back, and one of my very closest friends now, Carly, was leading sound sessions with the crystal bowls and under our teacher Yantara, and I just kept on following her around London, following her from place to place to place to place to place, and helping her and supporting her in her sessions. And that was it. Within a year, I was trained, and I was bold, and I was sharing as if I'd been doing it for decades.
Wow.
I didn't have like I was in my comfort immediately, and I knew that's where I was meant to be. Yeah.
Wow. What a beautiful story. And it's cool how often what we naturally gravitated or spent time as children doing,
Totally.
when we kind of find ourselves doing that as adults, everything is making sense again.
Yeah, it does. I mean, they always say, just look back into your childhood. What did you really love to do? Even if you're going through healing or doing deeper work, it's like, what, calling on your inner child, and what were the things that you can remember, if any, that brought you joy or made you laugh, and it doesn't have, they're just usually very, very basic things like movement, dance, joy, singing, painting, all of those things. And they might be interpreted in a slightly different form when you're older, but the essence of them are like always reminding us that the freedom is in the simplicity of, I look at my son, he's 3.5, and I just, what he loves to do is he just loves doing roly-polies everywhere, like roly-polies all along the garden. So we just go down the garden, we're lucky enough to have a garden, we go down the roly-poly, and we pick dandelions and daisies, and we talk about nature, and that's, that's what he loves doing. So yeah, being childlike for as long as you can, I think, is one of the keys to a long life.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious because we have like the Ayurveda, we have the sound healing, we have the yoga. You've also been very deep into the meditation and Vipassana. If we just go back to Ayurveda, for the people who don't know, I have basic knowledge of Ayurveda just from when I was in India studying my yoga teacher training and the Doshas and what we're trying to do and the science of life. But is there anything that you could like share about Ayurveda that you think is that, as you say, it's very practical? Like you can start oil pulling, or you can, if you want to balance vata, you eat more of grounding foods and these kind of principles. Is there anything else you could like share with people who might not know anything about Ayurveda?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a complete novice when you compare to people who are, have really, really studied Ayurveda, but I well, the first and foremost important thing is to find out your body type, your constitution, your dosha. And when you know one of the three or combining, they say you are born with your dosha, so it's your body type, but can change to varying degrees through your life cycle. So obviously, if you have a huge change in your life, or when women reach perimenopause, which I've entered now, the hormonal fluctuation can change your constitution. I have always been Vata, and I'm noticing that I'm a bit more Vata Pitta now, because I do have a little bit more heat in my body because of fluctuation of hormones. So you've got to find out what your constitution is, and you just go onto Google and you just put the dosha, Ayurvedic dosha, and you can do a little form, and it will give you your constitution. And then from there, you know if you're kind of more airy in body type. So the body internally carries a lot more air. So just thinking about like a windy day, and you're the type of person to get your sort of throat area by wind. I hate wind. Hate it. I mean, I literally am just like, get me away from wind. If I get caught by wind, it goes straight into my ears and affects my sinuses immediately. And then Pitta is a kind of like the more balanced energy, so it's like middle ground, and it's where what they call the Agni, or the fire within the system, is kind of a lot stronger. So a Pitta type compared to a Vata, which is, you're kind of always a bit like on the go, and you move quickly and you learn fast and you forget easily, and you might have a slightly more slender frame, not always, but you might have dry sort of hair or dry patches on your skin. It's the air element. And if you're Pitta, you're a little bit more with the heat, with the fire, and you tend to have a personality which is a little bit more balanced. Pitta energies tend to have voices that can be listened to. They're good public speakers. They all have a voice where people will turn around and give their attention to that person. And they have more balanced systems. So whereas the air in Vata can cause constipation and some, you need a lot of oil. You need really, really, whether it's olive oil or ghee or, whatever type of oil you like, sesame oil, it's oiling the system, constantly oiling, so you're oiling the joints internally and externally. The oil pulling can help that as well. But I'm talking about foods. So they've got to be really grounding and rooting. Pitta energy is a little bit more balanced, so they can sort of a little bit more broadly, and they're they're good in the gym, and they kind of got a lot of energy, and then you've got the Kapha energy, which is the other end of the scale of the Vata. So they're quite lackadaisical. They're quite comfortable just to sit and enjoy life and drink and eat, and they're the ones that can do better with, say, a raw food diet occasionally, or juicing, because their system is already really oiled. Whereas if you kind of put someone on a juice diet and a raw food diet that's overly Vata, you'll just have inflammation, bloating, gas. It's just the body going, really, please don't do that to me. So all this takes time to learn. I used to juice and I used to do all those things. And then when I really started to understand my body, I was like, okay, that's why I've got dry, like almost like eczema. And I notice it flares up because of the hormones. But obviously if I'm not following, even through the summer, spring and summer, it's harder for my body type to eat salads every meal. I just can't do it. I don't actually lean towards that kind of way of eating anymore. It's got to be warm food. And actually, it just changes, because I was a vegetarian for many years, and now in my 40s, my body is just, it needs the animal protein in a different way. And I find myself at 45, just turned 45, craving meat. Which I haven't eaten for over 10 years, 12 years. So, and Ayurveda can help you with this, because It can like point at simple things like too much caffeine can affect you at this time of day. If you were to, try to drink caffeine before midday, and kapha needs more movement. So, you can really push yourself with cardio. Whereas the vata body type needs to be in stillness and meditation and the yin practice, and the pitta constitution sort of sits in the middle and needs a bit of both. And you can have tridoshic, so very rarely people can be across all three, and they can eat anything and they can do anything. Their system's really balanced, but very few people, especially in this way we live now. But I love Ayurveda because of the seasonal element of it. Whether you're talking about herbal medicine like ashwagandha, or you're talking about growing vegetables, it's all about what's near you, what's growing in your environment, how much sun do you have, what's the soil like, and what is meant to be, what were people eating 200 years ago at this time of year? And we go into supermarkets and you have papaya, dragon fruit, strawberries, avocado, strawberries, blueberries all year round. And they don't look like strawberries anymore, I must say. But you think, wow, the luxury of choice. And what's that's doing is that's actually dampening our internal fire, our agni.
Yeah.
So, for me, I try, and I'm not perfect at it by any means. I do buy blueberries all year round because I really love them. But I also try to buy wild blueberry powder and wild blueberries frozen, and do it that way. But it's more like I buy apples when they're in season. So I'm buying from the regenerative farm at the moment whilst my produce is starting to grow. And I'm buying, so they sent me the seasonal box yesterday, the weekly box, and it had apples, great because we grow them in the UK, chard, brilliant, all year rounder, some rhubarb this time of year, and some salad leaves, which the rocket was so peppery. I was like, really, with little holes in. So our friends had been in already and had a go, because the regenerative farming is just leave it as it is. Everything coexists, no pesticides. I mean, even beyond organic, because organic in supermarkets is just not really, it's not good enough anymore. And we're still expected to pay a premium for it. So yeah, that's the principle of Ayurveda when it comes to food. Just eat what is meant to be growing at this time of year. And obviously wherever you are in the world, that's different.
Yeah.
So when I'm in England, in London, I do try to predominantly stick to that. And it's not always easy because I've got a 3.5-year-old. But all my meat is sourced correctly. He actually he's not into meat, but he eats wild trout. That's pretty much the only thing, and cod, and that's the only thing that he really has at home. I don't buy farmed fish, and I try to just have a lot of fresh produce around on plates, lots of vegetables, lots of either carrots or cucumbers if they're in season, just out with hummus and trying to make homemade hummus rather than buy a store. All of those little things, which is what culturally we do in Cyprus anyway. And then body wise, Ayurveda, lots of oiling. So I will feel it going through winter, finding it very tough going through winter in the UK this year, especially. I will need to start really massaging my body. So I will source some Ayurvedic oils. There's a brand my friend works closely with. She's an Ayurvedic consultant and therapist, and it's called Tridosha. And it's a really sort of underground brand, not very big. But I got one of their oils for my birthday a week ago, and I've been using it on my body, and I can smell. What one of the Sanskrit terms it was on the bottle, and it's something like I rest. It's like a mantra. Like I rest deep.
Oh,
I rest deep in nourishment.
mm,
And that is what Ayurveda represents to me. It's all about nourishing from within and the mind. And it's not always possible, but it's just like taking some of those principles. So the oiling, the massage are very, very popular, Abhyanga, but you can do it
yeah.
yourself. And it's just, Ayurveda is all about the long strokes, the real sort of gentle movement across the body. So I've started doing that on my body again.
Mm,
And the oil pulling, as you said, coconut oil coconut oil is usually what I use. Don't do it always either. Or the tongue scraping. I go through phases of tongue scraping,
yeah.
which is said to really help to remove the toxins from the overnight sleep.
Mm,
Um, and what are the principles of Ayurveda? I think, to be honest, I think food and lifestyle, diet and lifestyle are two real key ones that I adopted because I just think they make so much sense.
yeah, I agree.
Eating simply and seasonally, not having
Mm,
too, spices are great. If I make a dal or something, occasionally I'll get all the spices out. I try and use ginger. I try and use turmeric. I try and use, cinnamon. Um, it also just depends on how I'm feeling hormonally and where I am in my cycle. If I'm not really on the Ayurvedic path, I'm always with matcha or cacao, and I've got
mm,
two brands that I stick to. I've been drinking matcha for a long time, and the brand that I really love is Matcha Union, and it's
mm.
ceremonial grade, and you only buy it in small refills or small tins, and it's consumption is about 2 weeks, because as soon as the green tea powder loses its oxygenation antioxidants, it becomes a dull green. So when it arrives in this tiny little pack, it's the most vibrant green you could ever see.
Wow.
So that's why I invest in that, and I make it at home, and I choose whatever milks I want, and then and add some hot water, and I make it. And the cacao, the brand that I use now is called Holy Cacao, and it's a really lovely young lady who's really invested her time in creating this brand of wholeness with cacao, bone broth, and maca.
Oh,
And
no.
this combination is she's put it into a powder, and it's really, really good. I'm just drinking it now because I've run out of my matcha. And so you kind of go through life and you start to recognize what works for your body. Caffeine just doesn't work for me in the coffee form,
Mm,
very, very occasionally. But because I'm Vata, it's just overly drying. So you get so dehydrated as a Vata individual, and you have to constantly, yeah, as I said, oil yourself so that you're
mm.
you're
Somewhat.
lubricated.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing I would love is to have a chef, to have an Ayurvedic, to have an Ayurvedic chef to just come in, and we don't use in this. I don't think in this society we're not really encouraged to use the buckwheats and the millet, the grains in the ancient grains in the same way. And they do more in Ibiza. They use their ancient grain, shesha, and in other parts of the world, you can see where people use sorghum, or they use spelt, or they use buckwheat. And there's a rising community here, but people traditionally will go for the wheat flour.
Mm,
So it's just finding what works for you and your
yeah.
body.
Yeah. I'm curious, you've mentioned a bit about your heritage
Mm.
and the women before you. And I'm curious to hear, because I don't know much at all about that lineage. So I'm
Mm.
curious if there is any modalities or any like practices or even like foods or way of eating that you know about through this
Yeah,
heritage that you could share.
yeah, loads. I mean, loads. And now, as an adult, and I see myself um, administering things to my son if he's not feeling well, it's all from my heritage. It's a really
Wow.
beautiful, beautiful culture, and it's the Northern Cypriots, well, the whole of Cyprus, the island of Cyprus was one pre-war, pre-1974. So the Greeks and the Turks lived side by side. My father grew up next to Greeks, and there was no difference. The difference being is the religion, which I think the pressure is always put from external forces, never from the people. So the war, they created a border, they divided the north and the south. And so the Turkish Cypriots stayed in the north, pushed to the north, and the southern was for the Greek Cypriots. But they're Cypriots and they're the same people. The food's the same. The belief system is the same apart from the religion. So the island is full of ancient practice. And I see. So when you compare the Turkish Cypriots to the Turkish mainlanders from Turkey, I always say that we're the villagers and they're the city dwellers. And it's obviously Turkey's a big country. But the way they speak, their intonation is different, and we're more relaxed in our Turkish Cypriot speaking. So we're like mountain people. And we're raised with the goats and the sheep. I mean, obviously going back, right?
Yeah.
But there were no cows. So why most of us are dairy intolerant is because we haven't had that in our blood. We don't eat cows. As in, they do eat cows now. But when you go back to the origins, it was just sheep and goat herding and farming. All of the herbs, the medicines were from the mountains. So all of the nettle or the dark green leaves, or the nourishment from the iron from the dark green leaves. There's like a spinach, which is a Turkish dish, which most Turkish families still eat. It's called mola here, and it's just so rich in iron. And it's so time consuming because you have to pick the leaves, you have to dry the leaves, and then you have to cook the leaves for a very long time. So things like that. But growing up, my dad used to have cupping. It was a practice. So the women of the village would just do cupping on, for people who don't know the method, it's the glass, little glass cups, and they're all over the back, and it's heated, and they create a suction from the skin and bring the blood up to the surface to create circulation. There's a lot about relaxation and relieving tension.
Lymphatic system.
Exactly. And my dad had that when he was a child.
Wow.
And also another thing that my dad used to have in his, I think, late teens, was CBD oil drink.
Really?
CBD drinks.
Wow.
Because it was from the hemp plant. So, those sorts of things are instilled in me. So I am a firm believer of plant medicine. I've got homeopathic kit that I use a lot on my son. He's not vaccinated and doesn't do antibiotics, touch wood, so far, and just completely natural. I want his immunity to be strong, so fingers crossed that's what I'm building him to be. But some of the things that I would say that I've bought through there's an aniseed, we call it anason.
Oh yeah, I have that tea of that.
Anason tea, chai, yeah. So we have that a lot. We call that tummy tea, really. So if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable, you'll get the aniseed seeds and you'll brew it, and then you'll have that. And it's whenever I'm doing sound healing trainings, if I'm doing it still at the space here, I always have that the first thing that I offer people when they come into the house. Other things that I will pull through from my heritage is the protection of the evil eye, which I've got everywhere in the house, and the other thing is just always knowing that I'm protected. And the other thing is burning olive leaves. So obviously on the island, it's just the abundance is olive trees, or has been until now anyway. And one of the staple rituals growing up in my household was that my mum would go around every single Friday evening and burn olive leaves like sage or like Palo Santo, and you know, just go around and bless the house or cleanse the house, clear the house. So I still do that. I do love a Turkish coffee. I can't lie. And if I'm in Cyprus, I will lean into having Turkish coffee, and it's a ritual because I will read the tea leaves in the coffee cup, and that's a part of what I you know, part of my, basically, my mum would hate if I said this because she her connotation of the word is very different to mine because of the generation, but I'm from a line of witches, basically.
Yeah.
Because all of the women just knew. They knew, even if they were suppressed and if they had no voice, they just knew. And that's why the culture of the reading the coffee cups was so prevalent, and a lot of the women in my family still read them, and they're so spot on. Older generation, but they are exact to the point of information. And you know,
and the connection to nature, I assume.
connection to nature being a big part.
Herbs and the...
Yeah, I mean, if I speak to my grandmother, we often on the phone, we're often talking about her growing up in this village in Cyprus where she had a spring opposite her house. She used to walk bare feet everywhere, and they would just play, and all the community would bring each of like a cooperative, you know, like I would bring these leaves, you bring the meat once a month or once a year, you bring this, and they would eat together. Huge communal eating. So that's how my grandmother was raised until she came here when she was 16 and got married to my grandfather, who was from the same village as her, and lived off that way, and then to come to England in the you know, in the 50s when it was miserable. I mean, she suffered for many years, but yeah, I think there's a knowing. There's a knowing. My mum has it very strongly, and there's some women in my family that are like cousins of mine that have got it very strongly. And I'm talking about the intuitive connection. And I think I'm the first person in my sort of close family line that does what I do. And so for me, because of the portal has been opened because of the many years of practice, I channel, and it's quite overwhelming, you know, like you know, I don't call myself a psychic. But I just know. And actually that's quite difficult in this day and age. Less difficult than it was before, because even if you knew, you couldn't really say anything, or you were too frightened to say things. Now you know, and you feel like you have to say things, and that often puts you on the trajectory of being a threat. Still in this day and age. So I think all through my journey, one of the main things that I've tried to do is to encourage women, to empower women from a very, very young age, to just really encourage them to know who they are, to find this essence within themselves, and to not doubt it. And it took me a long time to discover that's what I was here to do, because of obviously the journey. And now I know I'm not going to live in the UK. I know 100% I'm not going to raise my son in the UK. There are things that but it feels so ahead of my time in a way. I always feel like I'm 3 to 5 years ahead of what's happening, so I can get impatient. And I know a lot of women feel like this because they get really frustrated with this something burning inside them. It's like, I don't quite feel like I've got to where I need to get to. And I know that feeling. So all I ever say is, trust it. It will come. If it's meant for you, it will come.
Wow, I love that sharing. And I think it makes a lot of sense given also your heritage, that you maybe the UK, like climate wise and the structures, and maybe not the sense of freedom that other places like Ibiza maybe offers more of, and the sunshine and the connection to nature that's more clear anyway, even though you could
definitely the connection to nature, and I see it in my dad, and I see it in my mother, who's my mum's mum. Particularly those two people who've really struggled in this country, and when they go to Cyprus, or when they've been to Cyprus in the past, you just see them come to life. And my grandmother is 88. She's going to be 89 in July, and she's just flown to Cyprus for a holiday with my aunt and uncle. And you know, I know when she comes back, she'll be just like, hello, glowing with her tan, and with lots of stories to tell. And my mum's not like that. My mum's a real Brit.
Oh, really?
And her constitution is just very different. But my dad and I share I've got his blood type. And, yeah, we're just very, very similar. So it's just, it's interesting that I just know that I can't be here.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. And I resonate a lot, like having lived, and I've always, or the past years, I've made sure not to be in the Nordics in the winter season, because it's
so hard,
cold and the dark. It gets to me, and I just think that life's too short at the end of the day, when you can be so filled with light from the sun that energizes us, makes us more creative, inspired. Like, it brings out the best of us, really. Even though I do think you need to honor the seasons, and you can't live in like summer necessarily all year round, but even in those climates there will be some kind of retraction in the seasonality. So you get the cold, but
Ibiza's cold in winter. You know, it's cold because it's not structurally designed for the winter, you know. So actually they're all stone houses, so it gets cold unless you've got a new build. But all my friends live in in the finca style properties, so they've got the wood burner oven, or a fire, or a fire of some sort. And when you're out, because the light, obviously amount of hours of light reduces. In the morning it's cold and damp. It's a very wet island as well, like the condensation is huge. And in the evening, so you get your bursts of sunshine, and it's really warm, and it feels like summer. And then as soon as the sun goes down, you're freezing again. So you know, all of my friends, their cars are filled with clothes. It's just like the layering, the off layering. Whereas you don't get that here. It's freezing cold in the morning. It might peak at like 4 o'clock to a warmth, and then it's freezing cold again at night, and you have to sort of adapt to that, you know, way of being. But I am embracing the seasons more as I get older. This is the first year that we've done a full winter and into spring, and we haven't been away, and it's good because it's anchored me. But I am exhausted. I feel like I've been, you know, through
running a marathon.
Yeah, I do. I really feel like and also having a 3.5-year-old at 45 is like not a good idea.
I can imagine.
It's not a good idea. I understand now that, you know.
You don't look anything like your age. I would never have guessed. And
Thank you.
I mean, obviously you're taking care of yourself very well. So you're probably, your age in the body is probably a lot younger, which is how you can do it.
I mean, my inner child, I think that's probably what it is. But I just think, no, I'm extraordinarily tired at the moment. But it's, you know, it's just phases of life. And I really understand nature and what it does. And I just think, oh yeah, I should have had a child in my 30s, not in my 40s. But even that story about my evolution of, I free birthed at home with my son.
Wow.
In the bath with no medical assistance. And had I had a child at 30 versus 41, I wouldn't have done that. I would have been in hospital and probably had a, you know, interference or whatever. And in my knowing, I knew that I had this communication with my son Ocean before he was, you know, when he was in my belly. And I just was like, he's telling me he doesn't want to be disturbed. And he came on time in 2 hours in the bath. We burnt the umbilical cord with beeswax candles. My mum turned up last minute. She was here praying, and a friend of mine was here, my husband, and that was it. And we didn't, no injections, no fear, no lights, no this, no that. It was just, okay, I'm just going to give birth.
Yeah.
And I just knew all along that was how it was going to be. And I stuck to my guns, and I didn't talk to people. And after a certain amount of time, I completely just the NHS were just not even on my radar. And obviously they can be an incredible help for most people. It was just my journey, and where I got to, I just knew he wasn't meant to come into the world in any other way.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have had that without that journey of the yoga path, the meditation, the sound, and the knowing. So it takes time and practice, and sound has been one of the most influential things for me in my life. And how it's come into play with the crystal bowls is that the amount of insights and teachings I've had through the bowls is incredible, and the amount of people that I have witnessed going through transformations through the bowls, learning the bowls, going out and playing the bowls and sharing in their own way is just so beautiful. And it's probably the most powerful sharing that I have ever done, even more so than the channeling, because the frequency is just so strong. So whatever I do with my life, I will always have whether I actually physically own them or not, which I don't ever say I own them, they're for everybody to enjoy, but whether I actually have them in my possession or not, the frequency of the bowls is just unmatched. And that's the frequency of Ibiza for me, because it's it's crystalline. So if you haven't experienced, anybody who's listening to this haven't experienced sound healing, definitely go and find yourself. You can listen to it on your phone or go and experience it, because it's very powerful.
Can you tell us a bit more about the kind of sessions you do and your whole sound healing offering? Because it feels like you're very forward within that space. Like I see different sound healing and stuff, and I've been to sound healing, but with you, I feel like you have taken it one step further than maybe some other people.
I mean, I don't know. I think I was trying to sort of word it to my friend yesterday, and I think the difference is that I've trained so many people in sound healing, and my courses are really short, so they're not like a year practitioner training. So I don't profess to be some, master, but I've got a musical background, and really what I love is that people can come in, and in 2 days they can get an introduction and the first level to the bowls, where they come from, how they're made, what the intention behind them is, learn the practice and the techniques, and then I introduce a little bit of healing, and then they can go off into the world. And if they want to come back and learn more, they do the level 2. But my sessions, so I've done my trainings, and then I do my private sessions, which I haven't been working a huge amount because, my dad's really unwell at the moment. So I've been spending time with my family a lot. But the private sessions have been about frequency. So I offer, it's kind of like a quantum light energy healing. Looks like Reiki, but I feel like it's broader than Reiki. It's a universe. I feel like it's a weird thing to say, but it feels like it's bigger than the universe. I can't quite describe it, but it's a light based energy. So I just try to bring a light into the body, and I finish and I complete the sessions with the sound. And in that moment of where I'm working on the body is giving me feedback. It's reporting to me what is going on. So it's either energetically, the chakras are telling me this bit, this is holding trauma, or it's actually I'm downloading information and I'm seeing images of a person or of a place or of some significance to this person. It depends on the individual. It depends on what they are ready to receive, what they're willing and open to receive in that moment. So I have given information to people who have lost loved ones, whether it's a name or a face, and a detailed description of a face or of something they used to do or say, and that doesn't happen in every case. And I have told people in the past that they need to go and check their breasts, and they've had breast cancer, and they've had treatment and they're fine, all okay after chemotherapy and all of but so it's those sorts of things that I feel like can change people's lives. But not everybody has that experience. So that's one of the things. So I always say when people come, just see it as deep relaxation. That's it. Just see it as deep relaxation. If you get anything more, then brilliant. And then my trainings, I think the difference, the way I was saying it about wording it to my friend yesterday, is that if you're new to the practice of sound and you're sharing it and you're quite young in your life, that's what you bring. You bring an uplifting, joyous, light energy. And if you are really like a seasoned practitioner of life, you bring the depths of what those bowls carry. And they are ancient, and they are carrying the wisdom of many, many, many generations or thousands of years, because they've been in the ground for so long, these crystals. So I feel like even in my trainings, if they're short, something's coming in energetically that is a stronger energy, is a force of nature that is more powerful than words. That's what I try to do.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Pleasure.
It is cool with sound because it's vibration and frequency, and the whole universe is made out of that, right? So we are sound in ourselves. We're just very dense, I guess.
Yeah, we're just vibrating. Everything's vibrating. Our cells are a wavelength within, it's been scientifically proven. There's evidence that everything comes down to a wavelength, to, a movement, nothing static, nothing at all. And you just look into nature. You just look into nature to see that it's always moving and it's always flowing in the breeze, or it's growing and dying and rebirthing, and it's just a cycle that nature follows. And if we can mirror that in any way in our life, then we are listening. And we have to fight harder and harder to mirror nature. So the sound, the crystal bowls or the gong or the Tibetan bowls or percussion instruments, they are our modern way of giving the body the frequency of sound that nature used to give us all day, every day, because we were in nature, surrounded by nature. So we've just got this more modern version of it, even though crystals are obviously very, very, very old, but yes, frequency is everywhere and it's around us all the time, and we are frequency. And you surround yourself with, illnesses can be very low frequency, mental illnesses, physical illnesses, and negative energy is very low frequency. Constant repetition of negative thoughts in your mind is a very low vibration. It's just constant reminder that we need to work to up the frequency. We need to keep, and this is why meditation is so important, and whatever form of meditation. So I meditate every single day without fail. I get up at 6:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and I put something on, and is a guided meditation usually, because that is what my body needs in this part of my life. And I do my meditation, then I get up and get on my day. And I've done that every single day for a long time, and it's non-negotiable. And that is what keeps me. And I still, because of the year that I've had, very stressful year. I've had anxiety for the first time in my life. That could also be hormonal, but I've had a lot of stress, and I've suffered from 4 panic attacks, which I've never had in my entire life. And I think the reason why I was able to clear it so quickly, and I'm not saying it won't come back, is because of the practices. It's because I find that stillness, and I'll cry and I'll release and I'll emotionally let my body go through this grievance or this loss, instead of harboring it, holding on to it. And that is why I'm able to move through things, not relatively, well, maybe gracefully, I don't even know, but move through them anyway, just move through them.
Yeah, more easily anyway.
Without being stuck my whole life, So whatever works for you, card reading, oracle cards, or rich tea ceremonies, or long walks in nature, or chatting to a friend, or getting it off your chest, moving your body, whatever version, horse riding, whatever version works for you. time away from the phones, time away from the screens, time away from the constant like negative data being drilled into you, like television news. I mean, it's horrific frequency, horrific, and they know that. They know that. So it's about trying to fight your way out of the system a bit. To just find your bit of sky and find your bit of, blue.
Little sanctuary in the world.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm curious, you touched upon it a bit, but I'm curious to hear more about what motherhood has brought you in terms of like growth and insight and
exhaustion.
I guess lack of sleep. I guess it's the list is long of maybe the downsides, but
no. Motherhood really, really cemented who I am. And I didn't know it for a very long time, but there was an internal yearning to be a mother, but I fought it for a very long time. And eventually I actually miscarried at the start of lockdown. So I was 3 months pregnant and I miscarried, which is a very common thing. Most women either go through it or know someone that's been through it. So, but the physical loss was quite extreme. I couldn't go anywhere, couldn't be seen by anyone, had to, go through 2 days of contractions or surges, whatever you want to call them, on my own with my husband. It was very painful. And then within a sort of short period of time, 6 to 9 months, I was like, okay, I'm ready again. And my husband and I were more on the same page of actually wanting a child by then. And then Ocean came into the world, but I was lucky enough never to have issues with falling pregnant, but it was just that I don't think maybe we weren't really, really conscious of what we were doing and ready to kind of go, this is it. Because it's such a big thing. It's such a big commitment.
A responsibility of a lifetime.
Such a responsibility of a lifetime. And you just want them to be happy and healthy. And that's on you. It's on you for like 18 years, right? But my mum always used to say to me, you will never know. You will never, never know the love I have for you as a child. You never, never know. And now I'm like, now I know. Now I know that there's someone in your life that you would do absolutely anything for, and it comes way beyond anything. And because of that, he's made me present, more present than I've ever been in my life through all the yoga, all the meditation, all the practices, because you have to be. And he is also, he pushes my boundary, like he pushes his boundaries to push my boundaries. And they come as teachers. They say your first child is your teacher and then your second child is your healer. And after that, I don't know, but he's definitely a teacher. He's a very, very smart, intuitive, sensitive, strong-willed child. And I'm like, oh my God, I just want to sleep. But it's just pure joy. He's just pure, pure joy as well. And I think the strength of knowing who I am is because of him. And I wouldn't have that strength of knowing if I didn't have him. And I know some women can't have children, some women choose not to have children, and so it's not the path for everybody. But in my world, from my experience, if I hadn't had a child, and we're only going to have one because 45, I'm done. If I hadn't have a child, I think I would have had a piece missing in my life.
Yeah.
An internal piece missing. So yeah, it's incredible. It's a miracle. The fact that your body can carry a human, can grow and carry a human. I was sick for 9 months. I had, the sickness, and I couldn't eat literally for 9 months. It was just like I ate chips and crisps. That's all I could stomach, and fizzy drinks. And thankfully he came out all right. But he's he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Definitely. I don't think he's going to be an easy child, and I don't think he's going to make it easy for other people in the world to be around him, because he just is like a sort of, he's like a tornado. But it's amazing.
No, that's so beautiful of you sharing that. And I guess, not being a mother myself yet, but it, as you say, like they mirror us stuff, right? And they try us and see how strong are you really, how much Are you gonna like align actions with words, and like they call us out on our bullshit, and like
totally
you can't pretend anything.
No, and then what he's recently started saying, who's the boss of the family, mummy? I am. And and he says it because he wants to know that he can do whatever he likes, and now we're starting to create some, you know, boundaries and some disciplinary rules, and he doesn't like it, and he wants to know that he is in control, and he's not. Obviously, he's a 3.5-year-old child, but it's really interesting because he's heard these words, or he just throws them back at you, and you know, he's always listening, always listening. But yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and I think if you get a chance, you have to do it. And I think it's what life's for, really, because you continue the life cycle, and
we're created to create, I guess.
We're creative beings. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a joy. I think if I'd had children in my 30s, it would have been a very different experience, but I would have had more. I probably would have had multiple children, but one is enough for this lifetime.
Yeah. Sounds like you'll have your hands full if he has a lot of energy. And
huge.
Right.
Yeah, he does.
And also, I guess, the experience, if you believe in like incarnation and that you choose your parents and all these kind of things, it must be cool to realize also that he's chosen you as a mum.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lovely philosophy. I do feel like he came in at a very, very powerful time in lockdown, just 1 month before my father-in-law passed away. And I feel he carries a lot of my father-in-law's energy, and he's very, very close to my mother-in-law, like they're best friends. And I feel like that's not an accident, you know? So I do feel he came at a certain time for a certain reason. Yeah, definitely. And he chose me as his mummy because he knows I'm very, very strong-willed, and it's important to be a really strong woman to raise a child, raise a boy, raise a son. You've got
in this world.
You know, you've got to have your purpose, whatever that purpose is. If that's raising a child and that's your purpose, then brilliant. But I think to raise a son it's more important. It feels more important at the moment to be really focusing on the boys, because they've just got a lot to manage and a lot to live up to, because women are just going to get stronger and stronger and stronger.
Definitely. And also, I guess I feel a lot for sensitive children as well, because the world isn't necessarily adopted towards like a high level of sensitivity and awareness to your surroundings, and a lot of compassion and empathy and these kind of qualities, and especially as a boy.
Yeah, I think it's a really fine line balance. It's basically it's self-esteem, I think. If you're educated to have good self-esteem, then you can have sensitivities and not be afraid, and you can have strong will and not feel guilty, and you can respect women, and you can not take part in the bullying, and not feel threatened, and not feel you can just find more. I mean, obviously I'm speaking generally, but that's the hope. The more self-esteem you have, coming from a really sort of strong place within you, then I feel like you kind of will have less trouble in life. But we don't really focus on self-esteem, so that, you know, a lot of these youngsters, teenagers, they have no self-esteem, no ability to say, you're doing that but doesn't feel right for me, so I'm just going to step out of this one, or I don't need to do that because I know my body's more sensitive, or it doesn't have to be the way for it's just that there's so much influence and pressure. So you just got to do your best, I think, as a mum.
Beautiful. Is there anything else? I see that time is ticking, and I feel like there's so much that you're carrying, and I curious to hear so much more, but maybe we can have another chat in the future.
Definitely.
You can go a bit deeper into certain topics, and I'm like curious to hear more about your Vipassana experiences and this and that. But to just for the audience sake, not make it too long today.
Yeah.
I wondered if there is anything else you would like to share, anything that you have coming up, maybe trainings or anything else that you would like to pass on to the listeners.
So I'm having daily messages about trainings at the moment. I am kind of on pause because of my family's importance of my family, but that will come again. And I also feel like it's evolving into more of a wellness consultant space. So things will change, but maybe I'll just leave a little piece of, I don't know, wisdom for people to embrace if possible, but just the closer you are to yourself and your truth and your authenticity, and I know these words can sound a little bit, well, sometimes, but the closer you are to yourself and your truth and your essence, the happier your life is going to be. So it's just the closer you can get to you, and what you then put out there is going to benefit you and the world around you. That's going to be my full stop, I think.
I love it. That's so true, and I really felt that in my heart. And I mean, that's what we're here to. We're just here to be ourselves, our most natural raw self, and not overanalyze and make life more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Even though it's easier said than done.
Definitely, it's definitely a work in progress, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's a good goal to always stay close to your own soul.
Yeah, I wish someone had said it to me when I was in my 20s. Basically, that's where that's coming from, because trying to be someone else, trying to have the voice of another yoga teacher, trying to look a certain way, trying to fit, trying to have the career of whatever, trying to fit in, trying to look a certain way, all of it, it's just not worth it. It doesn't get you any closer to happiness. So your truth.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I really enjoyed hearing about your perspectives and your journey, and so much. It's exactly these kind of things. I was sitting there hearing you talk about like Cyprus and how your grandmother would like play in the nature, and I'm like, maybe we should bring her grandmother on.
She'd be chatting for hours.
No, but it's so nice to hear the real stories behind cultures and also especially like the feminine lineage from these kind of places. And it's nice also that you come from an island, or your heritage is an island, and you feel the pull towards Ibiza. I guess that's kind of, you have the island girl in you.
I am the island girl.
Well, thank you so much, Selda.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for sharing so generously with us today.
Pleasure.
And I'd be happy to have you on again in the future, and we can go a bit deeper on some stuff and talk a bit more about meditation, because I feel that's like a topic in itself. Until then, take care. And
Thanks,
thank
Natalie.
You everyone for listening, and have a beautiful rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.